There are moments in life that split everything in two before and after. For Vivienne Calloway, that moment arrived on a Saturday evening in October, dressed in midnight blue, standing in the wings of the most stunning ballroom she had ever seen. She had been hired to sing one song, a love song of all things, the kind of song that makes people in expensive clothes press their hands to their chests and pretend they still believe in forever. She smoothed the front of her gown, checked her earpiece, and drew a slow breath. "Minutes, Miss Calloway," the event coordinator whispered. Vivienne nodded. She had performed at weddings before, corporate galas, charity dinners, private estates. This was simply another booking, another evening, another beautiful lie about love dressed in roses and candlelight, or so she thought. She stepped toward the curtain, and through the narrow gap in the velvet, she saw him, standing at the altar in a white tuxedo, smiling. The man she had kissed goodbye 4 days ago, the man who told her he was flying to Geneva for a business conference, the man who had a ring in his drawer at home, her ring still waiting, he said, for the perfect moment. "Daniel," the music swelled, the coordinator touched her arm. "That's your cue." Vivienne could not move. Vivienne was 43 years old, and she had rebuilt herself more times than she could count. She had grown up in a small town in Virginia, the daughter of a church choir director and a woman who ironed other people's clothes to keep the lights on. Music had been her escape, then her education, then her career. She had never been rich, but she had been for a long time deeply in love. Daniel Ashworth had come into her life 2 years ago, quietly, the way dangerous things often do. He was sophisticated, charming. The kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee and made you feel, for the first time in years, like you were worth remembering. He worked in private equity. He traveled often. He had an apartment in Manhattan that looked like a page from an architecture magazine. She had asked him once, "Are you hiding something from me?" He had laughed softly, touched her face, and said, "The only thing I'm hiding is how much I need you." She had believed him. Standing now in the wings of the Whitmore Grand Estate, one of the most exclusive private venues on the East Coast, Vivienne understood, with cold and absolute clarity, that she had been a fool. The ballroom was extraordinary, 300 guests in evening wear, crystal chandeliers casting warm gold over white peonies and ivory silk, the scent of gardenias and champagne drifting through the air like something out of a dream, or a nightmare, depending on where you were standing. Vivienne walked onto the stage on trembling legs. The spotlight found her, and across the room, past the sea of beautiful strangers, Daniel turned. For one suspended second, their eyes met. His face did not break. That was the thing that undid her. He did not flinch. He did not pale. He simply looked at her, the way you look at something you have already accounted for, already managed, already decided. Then he looked away. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said smoothly, "please welcome the extraordinarily talented Vivienne Calloway." Applause rose around her like a tide. Vivienne gripped the microphone. She thought, "I could walk off this stage right now. I could leave. I could make a scene in front of 300 people and expose him completely," she thought, "or I could sing." And something in her, the girl who had learned to survive by turning pain into music, chose the song. She opened her mouth, and she sang. Her name was Celeste Hargrove, 29 years old, only daughter of Edward Hargrove, the Hargrove of Hargrove Capital, a name that appeared on buildings and endowments and the Forbes list with quiet, relentless regularity. She was beautiful in the way that old money often produces, effortlessly, almost accidentally. Pale gold hair, steady brown eyes, a stillness about her that might have been poise or might have been something sadder. Vivienne watched her from the stage between verses. Celeste stood at the back of the aisle, waiting for her entrance, bouquet in her gloved hands. She was not beaming the way brides on television beam. She was composed, controlled. She looked, Vivienne thought, like a woman who had already made her peace with something. "What did you know?" Vivienne wondered silently. "And what did he tell you about me?" The song ended. The room erupted in applause. Vivienne lowered the microphone and stepped back into the shadows. Her hands were shaking, but she did not leave. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Vivienne found a chair and sat down before her legs gave out. Her phone showed 3 missed calls, all from her best friend, Renata, who had helped her book this engagement 6 weeks ago. She called back. Renata answered on the first ring. "Vive, are you inside yet? Because I just saw something online and I need you to." "I know," Vivienne said quietly. "He's the groom." Silence, then, "Oh God, me what you found." Renata's voice dropped. The Hargrove family announced this engagement 8 months ago. Vive. It was in the society pages. Daniel Ashworth and Celeste Hargrove. There are photos, press coverage. It was never a secret. It was just not in any world you and I would have been looking. 8 months. They had been together for 2 years. Which meant that for the last 8 months, Daniel had been engaged to an heiress, attending society galas on her arm, smiling for photographers, while coming home to Vivienne's apartment on Thursday nights and calling her his future. "Viv," Renata said carefully, "what are you going to do?" Vivienne looked up at the ornate ceiling of the Whitmore Grand estate. "I don't know yet," she said, but something was shifting inside her, not fury, not yet, something quieter and more dangerous, clarity. She found him 20 minutes later, slipping away from his groomsmen near the garden terrace. He saw her coming and, to his credit, or perhaps his shame, he didn't run. The garden was lit by small lanterns strung through old oak trees. The distant sound of a string quartet drifted through the evening air. It could have been romantic. Under any other circumstances, it might have been. "Vivienne," he said. "Don't," she replied. She stopped 2 feet away from him. Close enough to see the small muscle working in his jaw, close enough to realize, with a grief that surprised her with its weight, that she still recognized every inch of his face. "Long have you known I was booked for tonight?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, 3 weeks. "You said nothing." "I thought." "What?" Her voice was steady. That surprised her too. "What did you think, Daniel? That I'd sing beautifully and disappear? That I would simply be one more thing in your life that you managed and moved on from?" He looked away, toward the lanterns, toward anything that wasn't her face. "She is the right choice," he said finally. The words were almost gentle. "Her family, the merger, it's complicated. I'm sure it is. What we had was real, Vivienne. I need you to know that." She looked at him for a long moment. "What we had," she said quietly, "was real to me, and I think that's the saddest part of all of this for you." She turned and walked back toward the light. She was almost at the door when she heard footsteps behind her. Not Daniel's. She turned. Celeste Hargrove stood in the garden, still in her wedding gown, her bouquet hanging loosely from one hand. Her expression was not angry. It was not devastated. It was knowing. "I heard most of it," Celeste said. Her voice was calm, low. "I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention." Vivienne blinked. "You were listening?" "I followed him." A pause. "I've been following him in one way or another for 8 months, trying to understand who he actually is." She tilted her head slightly. "Now I think I do." 2 women stood in the lantern light, so different in age, in background, in everything, and yet in this moment entirely equal. "You should know," Celeste said carefully, "that I didn't choose this wedding. My father arranged it. Daniel was always a transaction. I knew that going in." Her voice dipped. "But I thought perhaps over time he might become something more. People do change, sometimes." "Do you still believe that?" Vivienne asked. Celeste looked down at her bouquet. "No," she said. "I don't think I do." What happened next would later be described by those who witnessed it as simply a wedding that didn't happen. No scene, no public declaration, no shattered champagne flutes. Celeste Hargrove walked back inside, found her father, and spoke to him privately for 4 minutes. Edward Hargrove, a man who had built an empire on cold calculation, looked at his daughter's face and understood something that no balance sheet had ever taught him. The wedding was quietly postponed. Guests were told there had been a family matter. Daniel stood alone near the altar for a long time before someone finally came to tell him. Vivienne did not stay to see any of it. She collected her fee from the coordinator, who, to his immense credit, said nothing at all, and walked outside into the cool October night. The gravel crunched beneath her heels. The stars were out. She sat in her car for a while, not driving, just sitting, breathing, letting the silence hold her the way nothing else could right now. Her phone lit up. A message from Celeste Hargrove. Somehow, she had gotten the number through the event coordinator. "Thank you for having the courage to walk into that room." "I don't think I would have." Vivienne stared at the message for a long time, then she typed back, "Neither do I." 3 months later, Vivienne released a song. She hadn't planned it that way. She had simply sat down at the piano one evening, the way she always did when something inside her needed to be said, and the words had come, slowly, honestly, the way true things always do. The song was called What We Had. It was not angry. It was not bitter. It was something rarer and more difficult. It was honest. It spoke of loving someone fully, without reservation, only to discover they had never offered you the same. It spoke of the particular grief of waking up from something you thought was real. And it spoke at the end of the strange, quiet dignity of walking away with your heart still intact. The song found its audience, not millions overnight, but slowly, genuinely, the way meaningful things spread. In the comments, women wrote, "I needed this." Men wrote, "I didn't know music could say this." People in their 50s and 60s who had carried old wounds for decades wrote, "How did you know?" She didn't know how to answer that, except to say, "I lived it." As for Celeste Hargrove, she did not disappear into her father's world the way everyone expected. She took a leave from Hargrove Capital and traveled to Portugal for 6 weeks. She sent Vivienne a photograph once, a small cafe by the water, a cup of coffee, an open notebook. No caption, none was needed, and Daniel Ashworth, he sent Vivienne one message 2 months after that October evening. "I'm sorry, I know that means nothing now, but I needed to say it." She read it. She did not reply. Some doors once closed are better left that way, not out of cruelty, out of wisdom, out of the particular grace that comes only when you have finally, truly learned what you are worth.